when I talk to kids in grade 11 and 12, I will start with this. We do a few other things, but this is kind of the starting point, and the handouts that I use everything's on the school division website. So if you're taking notes, you don't necessarily need to, because everything I talk about is on here. So I talk about finding their passion. Prior to the individual meetings, I will go to the school, talk to the students as a group. I share a little video with them, talk to them a little bit differently in grade 11 and versus grade 12, but we definitely have a little conversation. And then we talk about things like finding your passion. You want to wake up every day wanting to go to work. You want to enjoy what you do. And so we talk about that. So that's kind of the first part, finding your passion. And then I go through my blueprint with students. So I'm going to bring up another site here with my blueprint. And my blueprint has a lot of information for students on various and sundry post-secondary things that they might want to do. A minute here to get her loaded up. And everybody in grade 7 to 12 in Saskatchewan has access to this. So is it on my blueprint looking screen there? Does it say home? And
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So the who am I part is where I start with students in grade 11. We talk about things. They can do little questionnaires on their learning style, personality, interest, knowledge, motivation, and then they can do this compatibility survey. So after they've finished, and I'll just show you a report here. So when I did it, I just went in and came out as a 41% visual, 31 auditory, 28% kinesthetic learner. In grade 11 especially, it's important for students to start to understand themselves, and as much as they can, figure out what they like and what they don't like, things like that. The who am I? So I did a couple of these just to show students what they look like. So if you're doing one, you can pick the cluster that you like. So if you're really into agriculture, food, nutrition, or finance or whatever, so if you pick something and you think, oh, I wonder what a insurance appraiser is, what that person does. So you hit the get started, and you can answer questions. Do I like to review repair cost estimates with automobile repair shops? Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Do I want to estimate parts and labor and debt? Yes, that sounds wonderful. And you just go through and answer all the questions, and then it'll give you kind of a percentage of what connected to how you answered the question. So I came out as a 96 or a 33% match. So it'll give you a percentage of match based on how you answer the question. So you can kind of refine your search that way. So that's the who am I part. The high school part is a course planner. So if you want to keep track of the subjects that you have taken and what you want to take to graduate, you can do that. I did kind of a pretend mock-up here. It knows what school you're in when you register, so you can do that. Parents can log in here. I'll show you the access for how to get on there. If you go to the post-secondary tab, you can learn about things that you would do after grade 12. So there's information on apprenticeship, and you can learn more about apprenticeship in the process. And it has information on things like youth apprenticeship and the skilled trades in general, and all kinds of good information. And the college and university tab I find to be really handy if you're not sure where you want to go to school. This tells you everywhere in Canada that you can take a course in something in particular. And it likes to spin a while, even if the internet's good. So if I type in, let's say I want to go into nursing. So currently in Canada, there are 319 different places you can take something where nursing comes up as a keyword. So there's the U of R SAS Poly version. There's psychiatric nursing or critical care. And some of these students can't take because you have to have a degree to take them already and things like that. They're postgraduate diploma type things. But it's locations, and it knows you're logged in Saskatchewan, so those are going to come up first. If you want to focus on just one particular province, like if you really want to move to BC because you don't like it when it's minus 40 here, you can go to BC and check out the programs in BC. So that is the college and university tab. There is information on the states, so there's a few people who like who have an interest in going to the States on rodeo scholarships or different kind of sports scholarships. And that is up at the top here. So there's American institutions. It's organized a little bit differently, but you can certainly find a little bit of information. So I find this to be a little quicker than Google when you're looking for schools, because you can't, this has got every public school in Canada in it. So the ones that they don't have are the private schools or the vocational schools, like the hair and aesthetics and places like that. Those aren't listed here. There's a place that I'll show you where those are located if I remember to do that later. And the workplace tab. So just to show you a little bit more about the workplace and how to be successful in the job or on the job, it tells you, any job in here tells you a little bit about what people do, what kind of training is required, what the chances of getting a job are. And these are all Saskatchewan stats. It gives you a ballpark salary and a little bit about the workplace. It also provides some videos of people actually doing the job, some skills that people typically have, and then the kinds of related occupations that you might not have thought about. Obviously, these are very closely related, but it certainly gives you some ideas about what's out there. The work tab is kind of handy, especially for people going into the workforce. So you can start with just searching for jobs, and it's the same stuff that came up with the workplace and the videos and all that sort of thing. And another couple of handy things for students who are not going on to post-secondary after grade 12, there's information about, or basically how to write a resume, and it's kind of a fill in the blank. So if you've never had a job before and you're starting from scratch, you can check out the resume writing portion of this, as well as the cover letter. It's kind of like a fill in the blank resume. It's a little bit easier than just starting from scratch off a program off the internet or something like that. And you can save this in here, and it's saved in here as long as the Ministry of Education keeps paying for the program, which I believe they are. Then you can use this till you're 150 years old. So as long as they keep paying for it, you can use it. And the other thing that I always tell students in grade 12, if you used a Prairie South email, sometimes it doesn't want to work to log in, but sometimes it does. But if it does before the end of grade 12, you want to change it to your own personal email, because you can keep using it after you're done grade 12, but your Prairie South email is done after you're done grade 12. You can also do a job search in here. So again, if you're looking for work, right now there are 600 or 6,000, about 6,000 jobs according to Indeed. And you could use, instead of Indeed, you can get into Career Builder or Monster, Workopolis or whatever, but they're organized that way. I always like to steer kids towards sassjobs.ca. It's got a little bit of a filter that you can use to organize it according to where you're located or what kind of jobs you want. This one's a little more open-ended. The money tab, these are the, it's a guide. You can form a budget in here. There's a budgeting and financial planning tab, which is in the guide part here, but you can build budgets. I teach students to use things like this if they're trying to figure out how much to pay for school or how much things are going to cost and life expenses and stuff like that. And then all the guides here are really handy to learn about information like budgeting, financial planning, and apprenticeship, goal setting, financial literacy, mental health stuff, how to be successful in post-secondary, how to pay for it, going to the States, volunteering, stuff like that. So my blueprint is kind of a handy thing to use in terms of finding it or logging in. Students can go to the school division website, and under career planning, under the students tab, and career planning will come up. If you go to the bottom left, there's web-based career planning programs. There's a set of parent sign-up instructions and student sign-up instructions. So if you've never used it before, that's how to go about it. So you need to use this. If you just go to myblueprint.ca, it will tell you that you need an access code or something like that. You don't have that. You need to use it this way, because everybody's connected to a school, and it wants to know which school you're in, and then it gets you logged in, because it's right from all grade 7 to 12 students are already in there through the Ministry of Education. Okay, Back to the career counseling handout. So I talk to students if they're going to go into the workforce. They might not be wanting to go on to a post-secondary program. Talk about the armed forces potentially for some people. I explain apprenticeship and how that works. I go through Saskatchewan youth apprenticeship and how that works. And for some students, youth apprenticeship is a really great way to learn about a trade or about a few trades prior to going into one. And if you're interested and you want to continue, you can knock off 300 hours of the 7,200 hours it takes to become an automotive service technician, or the 5,400 hours it takes to become a welder. So you have to do 12 little challenges, little assignments. They don't take very long, but we go through those assignments. If we go back to the division website and we go to students and go down to apprenticeship credit, and we go down to the bottom left, Saskatchewan youth apprenticeship. So these are the 12 challenges. You have to be connected or be enrolled or enlisted in it with a person in a school. So someone in your school will sign you up. Usually it's a PAA teacher, sometimes it's principal, and they're not difficult challenges. They're things like take a trade, explain what they do, a little bit about the workplace, 4 important skills. And if you were paying attention to my blueprint stuff we went through, all the answers are right there on my blueprint. So this will take you like 5 or 10 minutes to do. And you do all 12 and you get 300 hours knocked off of those, like I said, 5,400 hours or 7,200 hours or whatever it is, depending on the trade. Okay, let's go back to for counseling. So I talk to students a little bit and parents a little bit about resume building, a little bit about how to get a job, resume writing and cover letters like we talked about in my blueprint. I always tell students to make sure that they put really intelligent things on the internet, post intelligent things. Don't put stupid stuff about yourself on the internet, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and so on, because a lot of times that's what keeps you getting a job. There's hundreds of people every day who don't get jobs because of the dumb stuff they put on the internet. Just ask all the politicians before every election who don't get to hold a seat or run for political office because they put stupid stuff on Twitter 12 years ago. Okay. And then things about job interviews and how to be successful with job interviews and things like that. There's job interviews that are kind of non-traditional, where students are asked questions about, do you tell me about a crisis situation and how you dealt with it and things like that. Those are those behavioral or situational interviews. So you want to make sure that you're prepared for those. Look up sample questions ahead of time. And then for students who go into the workforce, sometimes it's a part-time thing and they want to work for a couple of years and then they decide they want to go on to school. So always ask yourself, is it a permanent kind of thing, or am I going to be maybe going on to something, doing this for 1 or 2 years? And if that's what happens and that's what you want to do, then great. I just don't want students to have regrets and say, geez, I wished I would have gone on to school when they're 40 years old and they decide that it's too late to go to school. So make sure that you're steering the boat. When I talk to students about planning for post-secondary, usually a plan A and a plan B is important. If you're going on to a university, usually they make you have a backup plan or a second choice. If you didn't get into the program of choice, your first choice, then they get you to throw a different one in. For some students who are going into trades, if you're going into an apprenticeship and you can get in right out of grade 12, that's the best way to do it, or the most efficient way. And for those students, I'll just show you what I'm talking about there. I'm just going to go back here for a second. Go back to career planning and go to apprenticeship information. So there's 2 ways to get into an apprenticeship. One is get hired sometime after grade 12 and get an employer to run you through apprenticeship. An apprenticeship is about 1,800 hours of work on the job, or about 1,500 hours, and then you go for about 300 hours, 7 or 8 weeks to Sask Poly or somewhere else, usually it's Sask Poly, to take that 7 or 8 weeks of extra training, and then you go back to your job. And you do that 2, 3, or 4 times, depending on the trade, and you get your journey ticket. That's the most direct and the cheapest way to do it. But a lot of times employers say, we don't have the time to train you, so we want you to go to Sask Poly or someplace like that and do pre-employment. And it might not be Sass Poly, it might be Great Plains College in Swift Current, or Southeast College in Weyburn or Estevan, or some of their other regional colleges. But that's basically what you're looking at, is about a 32 to 36 week course. Then you get hired, then they run you through the apprenticeship time. And you still have to work the 7,200 hours, but usually you don't have to do all of the 7 or 8 weeks of training. You might only have to do the last 2 or 3 or something like that, depending on the trade. You come out with the same thing at the end, but you're not a full-time student in the direct way as you are in the pre-employment method. So if you can avoid the pre-employment method, then great, because it's cheaper. However, you can't be guaranteed that anybody's going to hire you. So I always tell students, apply for pre-employment, because you usually have to do that first thing in September, because it fills up. A lot of the trades fill up really quickly, like within a week or two, some of them. And in the meantime, then you see if you can find someone to hire you and get yourself a job. So if you can do that, that's kind of a plan A and a plan B. And then we go on to information for parents. So if you're the first or the oldest student and oldest kid in the family, usually parents are freaking out a little bit with the first kid. After they get to the second or third one, they got it all handled and it's okay. But the first one, usually it's a little bit nerve-wracking. There's lots of information out there for parents. Go to whatever post-secondary website that your child is interested in considering, and check out the parent section. There's all kinds of information there. I always tell students to make sure that they are really aware of the admission requirements. Some of them are based on your marks entirely. So if there's 350 seats in nursing, for example, that's one of the competitive programs. There's about 350 seats. They start at the top, who has a 99 average, who has a 98, 97, and they go down. And when they get to the 350th spot, that's the cutoff. And so usually the cutoff for some of those programs can be mid to high 80s. So nursing, as an example, is about 87% for a cutoff typically for the U of R Sass Poly program. So just because you meet the minimum, if it says minimum 70, just because you meet that 70% requirement doesn't mean you're automatically in. It means if everybody who applies has greater than that, the cutoff might be quite a bit higher. So just keep in mind that cutoff and admission requirement information. And then some are very open. They're open to anybody. As long as you have a 70 or 75 or an 80 or whatever the cutoff is, you're good to go. And a lot of times it's really important, especially in grade 10 and 11, when you're picking courses, to make sure that you pick the courses that are going to give you the best chance to get in and to change your mind if you don't know what you want to do. For instance, there's a lot of kids who think they know what they want to do, and then they change their mind, and then they're in a little bit of an issue where they decided, oh yeah, I was going to take pre-calc math, but I didn't feel like taking it, or I didn't like the teacher, I didn't whatever, and they end up taking workplace. Well, if you go to the U of S, you can't take anything at the U of S if you have workplace only. If you don't have foundations or pre-calc, you can't really get into much of anything. You can get into some things in some places with workplace, but if you have workplace only, it limits your choices a fair bit. If you have no 30 level science, it can limit your choices quite a bit. So I recommend that students go to, it's in a couple places here, you go down to choosing high school courses or to the high school course planning. There's a list of prerequisites for U of S, U of R, and Sass Poly. So you have to go through it according to which course you're taking in high school. So you need Health Science 20 to get into these two at Sass Poly. You need to have Biology 30 to get into this at U of R, U of S, and Sass Poly. And so you go through the list to see, if I didn't take Biology 30 or Chem or whatever it is, this is what I can't do or what I can do. And that's not the be all and end all either. I update that every year, but post-secondary institutions change frequently. So always make sure you double check with the post-secondary institution to make sure that you're able to get into whatever it is you're interested in taking. In terms of choosing a post-secondary institution, you want to find the right fit for yourself. It's just got to, you want to make sure that you can, it's It's going to be the right location. If, some people have a grandma or somebody who lives in whatever city, oh, that's what I'm going to live with grandma. Well, that's not the best way to choose a program necessarily. If they have what you want, that works out well. But you want to make sure you start with the place that's going to be good for you. So research it, talk to them, ask them questions, things like that. In terms of timelines and the deadlines to apply, I always tell students around Christmas time for university is a general rule of thumb. December 1st is a deadline for some institutions. The U of S has some like that. UBC and some other places in Alberta and BC have a December 1st deadline for certain programs, but generally around Christmas time, a little before, a little after for university is fine. There are SAS Poly programs like nursing and a couple of other medical ones where you have from October 1st to February 15th. And that's the ones where they start at 99 and go down. And whoever has the highest marks will get in. And then we get first qualified, first admitted. If you've never heard of it, it basically means on the first day that you take the course that's required to get in, you can apply and be accepted. And so sometimes that'll say grade 10 or grade 11. If you want to get into electrical, you want to be an electrician, it says grade 11 and a math 20. So on the first day of grade 11, so September 1st of grade 11, you apply, you can be accepted. Your name will wait in the queue until you're done grade 11 and done grade 12, and then you'll be sure to get in. I've done a lot of career counseling sessions over the years, and a lot of times I meet with kids in October to January, and they say, yeah, I applied on the 20th of October, but they told me it was full. Yep. Because that happens. If you apply, the earliest you can apply, if it says grade 12, the earliest you can apply is the 1st of September. And if you apply on the 1st of September, you're probably going to get in. If you apply on the 20th of September, you might not get in. It depends on how fast they fill up. A lot of them don't fill up right away. So, and they don't often tell you, where you are in the wait list and things like that. If you nag them a little bit, they'll tell you. They're getting better at telling people where you are in the wait list if you end up on a wait list, but it's certainly something to keep in mind. High school transcripts is a little bit more of a grade 12 thing, but I will show you where they're located. You have to ask the Ministry of Education to send your transcript to the place you're going to go to school. So we're back under the students tab under career planning. If you go to the left, there's a transcript tab. And eventually you will get to a screen that looks like this. You have to put your name and address and all that stuff in. Eventually you get to that screen and it'll say, when do you want your transcripts and where? So I always tell students to say, I want my transcripts sent as soon as possible. And then you add to cart. Another time after January exams, add to cart. Another time after June, add to cart, and then you're done. You only have to send it 3 times. If you were sending it to multiple places, let's say U of S and U of R, or SAS Poly and U of S or U of R, whatever, you would do that, and it would cost you an extra $2 over the 20. It costs you $25 to do this. If you do it all at the same time, it costs you $2 for each additional one over that $25. But if you did one today and one tomorrow and one the next day, it's $25 each time. So I always tell students or parents, if you're going to do it all at the same time. I wouldn't recommend you do this until after you've applied for school. Worry about that first and then do the transcript request. Okay. And in terms of living arrangements, I highly recommend residence. If you go back to the main school division site, we go to the planning tab and go down to, where are we here? There we go, residents can't read. There's kind of a pros and cons list for residents. Generally speaking, residence is similar in cost. You can find cheaper apartments and places to live, unless it's you're living with grandma or cousin Willie or something like that, and there's no rent involved. You're going to be fairly similar when it comes to cost. The benefit of residence, especially at the beginning, when students first start out, the benefit is that they are eligible, or you automatically get friends whether you like it or not. Most of the students I see are from small schools, and your first year math class may have 350 people in it, and I have students, their whole town doesn't have 350 people in it, let alone their school. So it's a big challenge and a big change to deal with that. So I recommend students to consider residence. You automatically have friends whether you like it or not. You don't have to worry about being anything other than just being a student. You just have to show up with your clothes and bedding and stuff like that. Move in. There's everything from single bedroom type things with a desk in the corner and you go get a meal plan, all the way to 1, 2, 3, 4 bedroom apartments where you cook for yourself and all that kind of thing. So I recommend residence at least for the first year, because it gives you a good transition to post-secondary, because there's a lot of change that happens when you move out of your parents' house for the first time and go into post-secondary. So I like residence. I think it gives you, just makes for a smoother transition. And there's really, even with if you're not eligible or not able to get to whatever place for a tour, they do have a lot of tours and stuff. But if you're not eligible or not able to get to a place for a tour, they have really good 3D virtual tours. You can see the rooms and the apartments and stuff like that. Both U of S and U of R are fairly recently updated. The U of R has basically updated the whole everything. It's either brand or fairly new, or it's just been updated. And the U of S one is pretty new, and the old ones that were really, really old, I think have pretty much all been updated. So it's a pretty good place to live. There are other places where students can take classes. So I mentioned earlier the regional colleges. You can take a lot of first-year university classes in places like Swift Current, Yorkton, Estevan, Weyburn, other small towns that allow that transition to be a little bit easier. And I would say the same thing for some of the trades programs. So there are trades programs in a lot of these places, and some of them are considerably cheaper than trades programs in Sask Poly. I know the electrical program in a couple places in Swift Current and in Weyburn or Estevan is something, the tuition's about $3,500, $4,000, something like that. And at Sask Poly, it's about $10,700, I think. So it's quite a bit different, and you're getting the exact same program. So they buy the curriculum from Sask Poly and they hire their own instructors to teach it. There's places like that. There's other places like St. Peter's College, and it's basically a second campus of the U of S. It's in the town of Munster, which is about 5 miles from Humboldt. You're not far from Saskatoon. You're about an hour from Saskatoon. But I mentioned earlier, there's a pretty good chance if you're going to anything at the U of S, you're going to be in a math class or chemistry class with 300 or 400 people in it. And in St. Peter's College, you're going to be in a class with 12 or 15. And so instead of making that big transition to Saskatoon right away after grade 12, you can do something like this. Makes the transition a lot smoother. And then in your second year, you just seamlessly move on to Saskatoon. You don't have to apply for anything at St. Pete's. You just apply to St. Pete's out of grade 12, move on to Saskatoon, and away you go. And they offer pretty much everything that the U of S offers for first year programs. So if you can find something like that, I recommend it, especially for students in smaller schools. Tours are great if you can spend some time to do an in-person tour in the places that have them. There are places that are still doing it. Medicine Hat is an example of one. St. Peter's did in-person tours. U of S and U of R went virtual with their tours last couple of years. And I don't know what they're going to be doing in the fall, but certainly doing a tour is good. You want to know when the tours are happening, the Career News, and I will show you a little bit about the Career News in a few minutes. That will be a good place to find out about things like that. You can get into places called federated colleges. So at the U of R, it's Campion, Luther, and the First Nations University. And you don't have to be Lutheran, Catholic, or First Nations to take classes there. At the U of S, at St. Thomas More, you don't need to be Catholic to go there either. They're like a school within a school. The main benefit is that you're eligible for all the scholarships at that school, in addition to the scholarships through the U of S or U of R, or whatever the institution is. Same thing at St. Peter's. You're eligible for all the St. Pete scholarships to the U of S ones. So you can certainly register through them. They're more of a liberal arts college. Most of them are liberal arts colleges, so you can't take everything through them, but you can certainly do some. And when it comes time to register for classes, this is more of a grade 12 thing, but when it comes time to register, I always tell students to talk to an academic advisor. It's really important to make sure that you're on the same page as that person. And you pick classes usually in May or June of your grade 12 year. This is university classes we're talking. I always tell students if they ever have any academic difficulties, always make sure that you ask questions. The universities realize that if you graduate at Christmas and you quit and go home, you're not really going to pay much tuition after that. But if they spend a few $100s in tutoring and helping you, they're going to get a lot more bang for their buck down the road if you stay in school. So they really want you to stay there. They want your brains, they want your money, and they're going to spend some time and money to help keep you in school. Some students have specific needs that will be accommodated in post-secondary. So if in high school you need a reader, a scribe, an isolated room, quiet room, or something like that, more time on an exam, whatever it is, as long as you've had a relatively recent academic test, like an educational psychologist assessment, you will have no problem getting the same help in university or in SAS Poly or places like that that you had all throughout your high school and elementary or middle years careers. Some students are recent to Canada, so if you did not write or if you did not take English or grade 10, 11, and 12 in Canada, you didn't maybe do your English 10, 20, and 30, you only did maybe English 30, you will likely have to take an English equivalency exam. Similarly, if you're not a permanent resident, you will have to pay tuition that is the international tuition, which is at least typically double or worse of the domestic tuition. So if anybody is a recent immigrant to Canada, you definitely want to make sure that you apply for permanent residency as soon as possible. And if you've been here for 3 years, you don't have to worry about writing the English equivalency tests. But some people are here for a number of years and still didn't apply for permanent residency. You're going to have to pay the international tuition, which is really, really expensive. If you are interested in going to the States, you will want to choose your post-secondary institution and then find out whether they are going to require that you write ACTs, SATs, or something specific to that institution. Sometimes they have their own standardized tests, and those are basically an general aptitude test with a little bit of math, a little bit of English, a little bit of science, history, all kinds of things. And there are set dates that you have to write them. You can write them in Assiniboia and Moose Jaw, Regina, different places. And if you just look them up on the internet, there's set dates that they have throughout the year. You can sign up and write them. Tuition is, depending on where you are, books, tuition, living expenses for a whole year is somewhere between $15,000 and $30,000, depending on where you are, and a bunch of other things. But that's kind of a ballpark number. Sometimes you get into a lot higher tuition for very specialized things. If you want to get into dentistry, just the tuition for 1 year of dentistry is about $50,000. So you definitely want to keep in mind the tuition costs that you are going to be facing. So that's why we talk about scholarships. So there are school scholarships. Most schools have some scholarships specifically for people in those schools. Then there are school division managed scholarships, and each post-secondary institution has some, and then provincial and national scholarships. A couple of things, especially for grade 11 students, it's really important to start scholarship applications, not the actual application part, but the getting ready to apply in grade 11, because it makes life a whole lot easier. I always use the analogy, if I said you're going to Europe for 6 weeks, if I gave you 5 minutes to pack your bags, would that stress you out? And if you say yes, then you will want to get ready for scholarships early, because when you start applying, it's going to stress you out if you don't have the background work done. So read up on scholarships, research things in grade 11. I always tell students also they're a little bit like running a marathon. If you had to wake up today and run a marathon 26 miles, you might not be ready for it. But if you've been training for it for 6 months or a year, you're ready to go. Same thing with scholarships. It's a lot easier if you've got the work done ahead of time. It makes life a lot easier. And it's a little bit like a part-time job. I always tell students, hey, if I offered you a part-time job for $50 an hour, would you consider taking that? Of course, most people say yes. And I say, if you spend 10 hours applying for scholarships and you get $500, it's like you're working for $50 an hour. So you don't have to quit your part-time job, but you definitely need to spend time getting ready to apply for scholarships. Some students in grade 11 might not yet have a social insurance number, so you'll want to do that as soon as possible. Make sure you get a social insurance number because you need it when you apply for certain programs or student loans and scholarships, things like that. So there's 5 things that students need to consider when they're applying for scholarships. One thing is that are things that are considered. One thing is what students do. So if you volunteer, if you are a member of your community who is involved and is busy in doing things, and you're busy, whatever it is you do, you start writing those things down. If you have certificates in anything, if you've accomplished things, if you have awards or whatever, start writing those things down. Then think of associations or connections you have. Some students are members of 4-H or hockey or golf association. There's a whole bunch of different options, or maybe service clubs that your parents belong to or things like that. Sometimes there's money specifically for the program that students are entering. So if you're going into healthcare, there's money specifically for that. There's money for trades if you're interested in going into any Red Seal trade. So it means you're certified as a carpenter or mechanic or whatever anywhere across Canada as a journey person. You can get money from the federal government for that. Some people have athletic or musical skills. They play hockey or football or music or baseball or whatever it is in university, and they get scholarship money for that. And then the marks you have. So it's not always about marks. I found that a student with a good 85 or 90 average and does a lot of stuff is more likely going to get scholarships than the student who has a 97 average and never leaves the house. One thing that you can do in grade 11 is to apply or to register with companies that are kind of like a news aggregator, but for scholarships. So Scholartree, Scholarships Canada, a few that are listed here. Those are companies that will send you an email and say, hey, there's a scholarship coming up this month. You tell them about yourself and about the program you're interested in taking. And they'll say, hey, there's some scholarships coming up this month. You should apply for them. And then student loans, I will touch on. I'll show you, I'll do a tour of the website here in a couple of minutes, and I'll show you information about student loans. And that brings us to the end of that. We'll get rid of that and we'll go back to the career planning. I always show students this list, and I don't go through them all. I crack open a couple of, but there's apps here that you can use to learn about things. Keys to success. These are 3 areas that students often have trouble, especially in a first year of post-secondary. One is breaking down large tasks. So if they give you a 500-page textbook, you have to write a 25-page paper. How do you break that down into manageable pieces? Time management can be a big issue for some students. So they show you how to organize yourself here and make sure that you stay on top of things. And then how to read effectively and efficiently. If you ever read anything and your eyes are kind of scanning the words, but in your mind you're out riding a bike, reading a potato, or looking at the stars or something like that, SQ3R is a reading strategy that you can use to help yourself become better at reading. So it's basically look at a chapter in a book you have to read, look at the introduction, conclusion, pictures, get an idea of what it's about. Then the Q is write down some questions that you think are going to be answered by doing the reading. And then the 3 R's are read it, recite means answer the questions, and then review. So go over it. And it makes you more of an active reader, and you get a lot more out of it when you read, as opposed to just kind of reading and having to read it over 5 or 10 times to get it. There's some questions here that go with the big handout that I showed you. There's career safety training. There's a lot of free safety training through the Saskatchewan Safety Council. One program that they offer is just kind of a high school career career safety training. So the program is you take a young worker readiness certificate, WMIS, mental wellness, and then there's one of these that you select as an elective. And if you're interested in healthcare or construction or something like that, if what you're interested in doesn't fall into this, that's okay. This is another thing that you can add to your resume, and another certificate. You can say, yeah, this is what I did, and you can add that to your list of certificates that you put together when you're applying for scholarships and things. There is, this is a little bit more for grade 11, possibly kind of for grade 10 students as well. It's basically the idea when you're going to choose high school courses, keep your options open. And if you keep your options open by taking, if you take pre-calc math, if you have pre-calc 30, that trumps everything. If you have pre-calc 30, you don't really need workplace, you don't need foundations. You do need pre-calc to get into certain things, but not everything. But you don't know if you're going to change your mind down the road somewhere. So I always tell students to consider taking everything you can handle. If you have a 20 level science just to graduate, that's going to keep your options fairly limited. If you have chemistry and biology, that's going to keep things all open quite a bit more, chemistry and biology 30. If you have physics, that's even, keeps you even a little bit more open. It's basically just to keep your doors open, because you never know. You change your mind when you're 25 or 30 and you have to go back and take high school classes because you didn't take them in school. It's a little bit easier to take them when you're in grade 10, 11, and 12. This credit tracking handout you can use to keep an eye on what you've done so far, and it breaks down the requirements that you have for getting your 24 credits to graduate. This to-do list is a list of things, and I push this with students and make sure that you do these things in grade 11. So things like read the career news, and I'm going to show you that. Volunteer as much as you can. I know it's difficult with COVID, but do what you can. Use my blueprint, read through Relevance magazine and stuff. I'll go over with you when we get together, and I'll show you Relevance magazine. So do as much as you can. A lot of it's grade 11 stuff, then some of it's grade 12 stuff. We get into a little more grade 12 stuff here. So just do the kind of a checklist. Okay. The timeline here, these are generally speaking when stuff happens about this time every year. You get an idea of what your requirements, what's going to happen in your graduating year. So about this time every year is when, September you want to do your first qualified, first admitted. October is when high demand stuff at SAS Poly opens up, or competitive stuff. And then you move into the dates for some of the big career fairs. And then February 15th is a big deadline for U of S scholarships and so on. So you can take a look at that. And this is kind of about some of the transition things. So things that you have to figure out how to do in grade 11 and grade 12, after grade 12, and how to be successful in post-secondary. So it's a little bit of that transition type stuff. And the relevant, I didn't show you the prerequisites. I did show you the prerequisites earlier. I guess that was the list of prerequisites for U of S, U of R, and SAS Poly. Relevance magazine. And I don't have the I did have the up-to-date version. Okay. So when you go through Relevance magazine, there's all kinds of information. I haven't gone through this one yet, but it's a Saskatchewan publication. It's got Saskatchewan stats in it. It's a really cool magazine because it's got information, recommendations, advice for students, and it doesn't take long to read through. It's real chunk, little bits and pieces here and there. You can read it wherever and whenever, and it's all online as well if you don't get a hard copy. And I like page 20 because it has scholarship information, and they're all hyperlinks. You just go there, click on the link, take a look at it. Some of them are going to be for you, some of them will not, but take a look at them and see what's available to you. And students always want to know how much money they can make. So it tells you a little bit about the job. This happens to be business, finance, and administration. They're all broken down into categories. So accounting clerks or accounting technicians or admin officers or whatever it is, the money that they're making, the skills, knowledge, tools, technology, other requirements, and the training or the places you can take the training to get into that. So that's Relevance Magazine, Saskatchewan statistics too, so it's not an American thing. I showed you the residence stuff and the apprenticeship stuff. I do include the nursing program information here because it's a little confusing, so you can take a look at that. There's basically two main programs in Saskatchewan, U of S and U of R/SAS Poly. And then for those students who are not sure about what they want to do, and I always tell students, think about what you really enjoy. You want to wake up every day wanting to go to work. So it's something I talk about when students are in grade 11 quite a bit. If they aren't sure what they want to do some of these things to get the ball rolling and learn about things. So finding your passion is the thing I talk about a lot. There's a guy named Ken Coleman. He does career counseling on the radio. So I always tell students, if I suck at career counseling, you can phone up Ken and get some advice over the phone, and he will tell you how it is. But there's information on his website that's helpful. So it's kind of three basic questions. So to find your passion, ask, who do you most want to help? What problem do you most want to solve? And what solution do you most want to provide? So if you can kind of come up with answers to that, and there's some examples here to sort of help you, that's probably the best thing you can do in grade 11 is figure out what you want to do by finding your passion. And sometimes the light bulb just comes on and you figure it out, but a lot of times it takes some work to do. So I recommend spend some time figuring it out, and eventually you'll hopefully have it figured out. At the bottom, I always ask open-ended questions too. So like if you had $10 million, you didn't have to wake up every day to go to work, to eat, to live, to have a house, and stuff like that. What would you wake up and do? Like some people love fixing cars so much they would do it for free. They would just wake up every day and fix cars, or they would play with kids, or they would do whatever. Those are the kinds of questions you can ask yourself. This career clarity guide is something from Ken Coleman's website that I recommend you take a look at. Again, to find your passion, ask, the talent is what you do best. So write down three things that you do really well. Passion is you write down three things that you really love to do the most. And then mission, write down three things that really matter a lot to you, results that matter to you. And you go through the exercises and they will inevitably help you to figure out what it is you want to do. So that's what should I do after high school? We went through the transcripts. The course planning is that list of prerequisites. There's contact information here for people in the U of R, U of S, SAS Poly. A lot of the students I see go to Alberta and other places. There's Great Plains and Swift, and there's Olds in Alberta, Medicine Hat, Lakeland and Vermilion and Lloydminster, and Sask Apprenticeship. So there's some contact information for people if they want it. And then the web-based career planning programs, that was the My Blueprint. So if you go there, it takes you to the site. If you've never signed up as a student, do so here and get instructions there. And then the parent sign up instructions are there. We encourage parents to set up an account, learn more about it. Next thing is the career news. So I always tell students to check this out every month. I'm going to crack open January here for you, make it a little bit bigger. So every month I put this newsletter together with information for all kinds of different post-secondary things. Most of it's post-secondary related. There's not a ton for students going right into the job market, but all kinds of different things. So I'll show you about Regina District Industry Education Council in a minute here. There's a Chatter High, is a gamified content engagement platform. If students have never used it, it's a pretty cool program. And they're doing a thing with Skills Canada, which is a contest running in April, and you'll get more information about it. Hopefully each school is going to participate in something like that. So the first part is just information that doesn't necessarily fit anywhere else. And the next part is specific to every post-secondary institution. So when I dig around on their website or they send me stuff, this is where you're going to find things. So the dates for open houses, how to write a successful scholarship application, stuff like that. You know, there's different things, different events going on, any new stuff, all kinds of different things. So I dig around to find as many bits and pieces of whatever it is from wherever and put them into the newsletter. So then we go down to the regional colleges. So these are those 7 regional colleges that buy the curriculum from SAS Poly. You can take first-year university courses. You can take a lot of trades courses. You need to just go to their website and check them. Often you'll see them when you're using my blueprint, and you'll come up, you know, we'll say you can take the electrician program in Moose Jaw or Saskatoon at SAS Poly, but you could take it in Weyburn, or you could Estevan, you could take it in Swift Current, you could take it in, you know, Humboldt. There's different places like that. And then the career colleges, those are the ones I mentioned earlier, those private schools. So if you're going into hair and aesthetics, things like that, you can check that out. This section of the newsletter is kind of a compressed list of dates. So if you don't want to filter through, usually they're in here twice. They're here and then they're with the post-secondary institution previously. And then we get into the scholarships. So I mentioned earlier through the news, or in the newsletter, there's Scholar Tree, Student Awards, Scholarships Canada, all that stuff. And you can learn as much as you can, or gather as much information as you can in grade 11 in order to be prepared in grade 12 to apply for scholarships and be ready to roll. Makes your life a lot easier. And there's information on loans and different things. Anybody who's got First Nations heritage, Gabriel Demond Institute is fantastic to get you going in the right direction. To if you need to have a Métis card, status card, or any of that type of thing, or any kind of First Nation stuff with scholarships and funding and things like that, check out these links because they're going to help you a fair bit. And then the list of scholarships, and some of them are very specific and some of them are open to anybody doing anything. So for instance, the let's see here, this one you have to write a specific paper on wastewater. This one you have to be First Nations. This one you have to be female. This one you have to open up a CIBC account. This one you have to write a rhyming cowboy poem. So yippee-ki-yay. You just have to spend time digging through the piles. Some of them you have to be going, and I don't see any right here right now. Let's see if we can find some. There we go. So this one you have to be going into a very specific program or occupational health and safety. But most of the other ones, and then this one here too, the Schulich leader, you have to be going into engineering, entrepreneurship, business. If you're going into education, you can't do it. If you're going into SAS Poly, you can't, because there's specific universities or technical schools that are involved in that or connected to that school or to that award. But you just have to dig around. And I tell students, don't apply for every award, apply for every award you're eligible to get, because it's a waste of your time and their time if you're applying for ones you can't get. Don't apply for the plumbing scholarship unless you're going into plumbing. But if it's open to anybody doing anything, then you take a shot at it. Like this one, you don't have to be going into anything. Just write an essay or a short story of 3,000 words, and that's it. You don't have to be going in. You can be going into engineering, and a lot of people in engineering don't like writing, but if they're really good at it, you can go into something like that. So just dig around. And there's the odd one that are open to anybody and doesn't require writing an essay. I'll just show you right here. You collect 1 million laptops, phones, tablets, or devices, you can get $1 million. Or collect 100,000 of them to get $100,000. So there you go. As long as you have a big garage or a place to put them, there you go. So it's things like that. There's other ones like the one in, I think it's May or June, the Duck brand duct tape company has a scholarship for the best grad dress or tux made out of duct tape, which I can imagine be a little bit warm sitting on stage when you're wearing a clothing entirely made of duct tape, but it's something to consider. It doesn't take any essay writing and no essay writing required. Okay, career spotlight. Oh, look at that guy there. Okay, so if we go down to the Regina District Industry Education Council, we partnered with these guys last year and they are an organization. They're involved in the Saskatoon version makes that Relevance magazine that I talked about. So in this is about, I don't know, somewhere 100, 150 videos that are kind of a combination of a presentation and an interview about people doing different kinds of jobs. And they're organized according to different categories. So for instance, if you're, for the parents out there, parents as career coaches, if you hit this, there's information on Sask Poly, on Regina Trades and Skills, on U of R, U of S, different things, how to fund your kids' education, stuff like that. And then if we go back, there's information on financial literacy, or if you're interested in health careers, here are interviews with lab tech, doctors, pharmacy, nurses, home care, you name it. There's a bunch of different things. And then if you want to get into agriculture, there are interviews with ag scientists and ranchers and people in grain companies and commodity traders and you name it. So you just have to spend some time digging through this, because I always tell students the best way to learn about a job is to do it. If you have a part-time job and you know a lot about that job, but if you've never had the job, you don't know anything about it, it's going to take a while to get your head around it. So if you can do the job, that's the best way to learn about it. The next best thing is to talk to somebody who's doing it. If you can't actually do it yourself, talk to somebody who is. And if you can't do those two things, check out places like this, because they're going to give you information on what people like about their job, what they dislike, all kinds of different things. So I would recommend you take a look at the YouTube channel from Regina District Industry Education Council. So that's a career spotlight. And then I'm going to go on to scholarships and loans. So for students who have never applied for a scholarship, these are the starting points. How do you dot the I's and cross the T's? What do you need to do? I would recommend you go through each of these. We'll do that in a little bit greater detail in the grade 11 or grade 12 visit. But budgeting, financial planning, information on student loans, apprenticeship information, there's all kinds of different things here for students to check out. And the next one is scholarship search engines. So these are a little more general. Then we get into a little more specific ones. So if you're going into agriculture, let's say, or very specific government ones, health or SaskTel or different things, it'll give you some information on that. Career News is on there a couple times because it's that important. And then there is information here for each post-secondary institution. So different places in Saskatchewan have each of them has a scholarship site, so you can check out those. We include Alberta because a lot of our students go to Alberta. Not too many go to Manitoba. We get a handful to go to BC, but a lot of Alberta students, or a lot of students, head to Alberta. Then you can check out the scholarship organizer. I like this because it will help you to keep yourself organized. And I think I might have to share my screen again. Let's see. It's over. Is there a spreadsheet with red across the top?
Yep, looks good.
Perfect. Okay. So this has, and you can, if you're a good scholarship or a good scholar, if you're a good spreadsheet creator, you can do this on your own. But this one's made for you. You can put as little or as much information here as you want. But the part I like the most is you have a bunch of deadlines. If you had them on paper stacked up, or they're under your bed and the dog ate them or whatever, you might miss a deadline, but you put them in here. You hit the little sort arrow and it'll sort them so that the ones that are due first are up at the top. Keep you organized when you're applying for scholarships. Okay, and the last little bit. These scholarships are the ones that are managed at the school division level. So if you see schools here and your school is not one of them, it means that there are no scholarships specifically for your school, where the sponsor of the scholarship gave a check to the school division and said, you guys handle the paperwork and the money. If you see a scholarship here, it's because the sponsor gave a check to the school division and said, here you go, you guys handle the paperwork and the money. So anybody in Prairie South graduating this year is eligible for any of these if you meet the criteria. Some of them are very specific. There's only one that's open to anybody. That's this Journey to Hope one. Every other one, like this one, is for people going into aeronautical engineering. If you're not going into that, don't bother. This one, you have to be going into education. You have to have graduated from Lyndale and Moose Jaw. You have to have some kind of special needs. I'm going to come back to this one. This one, you have to play lacrosse in Moose Jaw. This one, you have to be going into journalism or something with an English or major or minor. This one, you have to participate in the Moose Jaw Festival of Dance. And this one, you have to be going into agriculture. So those are all musts. Those are all things you have to have done. This JGL one's a little bit different. It says there's 10 awards. So there's 10 separate awards that are available. And it says you can go into any program with preference to those given to applicants enrolled in an agriculture-related program. That means that there's 10 really good agriculture candidates and you're going into something that's not agriculture, you're not likely going to get it. However, in the past, there have been only maybe 8 or 9 agriculture candidates. That leaves room for 1 or 2 other people who may be really good candidates, but aren't going into agriculture. So you can take a look at something like that. I always use this as an example also of kids, or of what to tell students, especially in grade 11, academic diligence and community involvement. So you work hard in school, you work hard in the community, people want to reward you for that. Letter with your career objectives. Usually you just write it once and you tweak it 100 times, send it to 100 different scholarships. You don't have to reinvent the wheel each time. And then letters of recommendation. Always ask people for letters of recommendation early. Usually that's going to be 2 people, 2 categories of people will write those letters. One would be teachers and one would be a part-time job employer. So when you're getting people to write those letters, tell them about yourself. Teachers know about your academic diligence, but they might have no clue that you go to volunteer to work at a soup kitchen, or that you volunteer to help coach a little kid's ball team or a hockey team or something like that. You have to tell people the stuff about you that they don't necessarily know. So if you do that, you're in a good spot. So tell people the things about you that they don't know, and you should be in a good position to write a good scholarship application. So that's everything that I need to run through with you. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them. Not all at once now.
That was lots of information, Jeff.
Yeah, it looks overwhelming, and it kind of is, but if you go over it, I always tell students to go over it in the next couple of days after I talk to you, because if you don't, it'll be all kind of like starting from scratch if you haven't seen it for a while. But going over it, it's like I said, it's a bit overwhelming, but if you have a look at it right away, it's not so bad. But and everything's on there is printable. You can download it, print it off, and read it on paper if you prefer that to reading on your phone and things like that. But they're all PDFs and fairly easy to access. And it's all under basically 1 tab, students, or 2, and then the career development and the scholarship tab under students. So if you go to the students tab, that's going to tell you what you need to know.
Yeah, I can see this is why you'd want to start this in grade 11, possibly even grade 10, to take a look at this and see what you need to do to prepare yourself for life after high school. What is it that they want to do? Start thinking about it, and just get things prepared. Yeah,
I usually do a 1-hour presentation with grade 10s, but the individual stuff, usually grade 10s aren't quite ready for some of this stuff. Grade 11s generally are, but it's definitely good if you've seen it in grade 11 to kind of start pondering, and especially if you don't know what you want to do. If you've been sure since you were 5 years old that you wanted to be whatever you want to be, then that's not so bad. But sometimes that changes too. I've had all kinds of kids do things over the years. They've decided to change their mind once, twice, or 56 times between the grade 10 and grade 11, or grade 10 and grade 12, and that's okay. It's just a matter of spending the time. You want to make sure it's the right fit for you, and it's going to be something you want to wake up and do every day. That's the big thing. I would tell kids you gotta enjoy what you do.
That's right. And when students start off into a program after post-secondary or start working, you can change your mind. You're not locked in.
Yeah.
I don't know of many students that start and end in the same program. They will often change their mind at some
Yeah.
point in time. And the switch could be minor or it could be substantial.
Yeah. I always tell students, because I say I'm cheap, I don't want to change. I don't want to, if you don't have to, because you don't lose all your money or anything necessarily. You can lose some classes depending on when you change. If you change in the first year, if you're talking university, then you don't usually lose out on a whole bunch. A lot of stuff is electives and you can transfer things and everything's not so bad. But if you are into your third year and you realize, oh my goodness, I don't like blood, ooh, and you're in nursing, that's going to be a bit of a problem, because a lot of the stuff that you've taken is going to be not transferable to anywhere, unless it's something else in healthcare. And if you don't like blood, then you should probably figure that out early. But I still remember, I push the idea of work experience for students, or even just your own, get a job in something that's in that, in the field that you might like. I talked to a student, she wanted to be a nurse since she was 4 years old. She did her first work placement, and within an hour or two, she said, yeah, this isn't for me. I didn't realize how much I don't like this. And she didn't know it until she actually took was in the work placement in grade 10 or probably grade 11. So she changed her mind. I have no idea what she's doing now, but I'm pretty sure it's not nursing, because she decided in grade 11 that was not going to be your thing. So the more you do it, the more you research, and the more you know. Like I always tell students, it's a little bit like if you have the questions to the math test ahead of time, you will do better on that test than if you didn't. And if you dig around and find as much information about something, what the likes and the dislikes, and that's why researching, talking to people about jobs, all that stuff, gather as much information as you can. And if you can make an informed decision early on, like if you can handle the worst of the job, then you can always handle the best parts. Always take
Yeah.
the worst parts of it, like person, or practice, doing the job as a work placement or a volunteer thing, or whatever it is. That's going to put you in the best position to make a good decision about whether you want to take that program or not. So
yeah, well, and the resources there in my blueprint, that's a great resource. Take a look at the jobs, what it's all about, and then those interviews, like you said, listen to somebody that does the job, start thinking about, this is what I want to do. And at the end of the day, with education, oftentimes there's so many different options. Like nursing, you look at all the different nursing jobs out there, that you get tired in one area, you can transfer into another. But as long as you've got your degree or your certificate or your diploma, you can do those types of things.
Yeah. And I always tell students too, there's some that are very direct, like you can get a degree in nursing, or you have to have a nursing degree to be a nurse. You have to have a law degree to be a lawyer. You have to have an education degree to be a teacher. But you can go on to a whole bunch of different things with a degree in liberal arts degrees. They don't direct that. It looks like she wants to get into law eventually, but there's no direct way to go into a law degree, because you have to have a degree beforehand or a couple of years of university. So things like that are examples of degrees that don't have a specific direction tied to them. But you can certainly go on and do all kinds of different things with the skills and abilities that you have, and bring to whatever you bring to the table, bring to that job, right? So I was talking to a buddy of mine. He has a friend of his, or a student he used to know, who is, I forget what degree he had. Oh, like justice or something like that, or human justice or something in that realm. And he is in workers' comp, or I know a kinesiology grad who's in workers' comp, or some places like that. So you don't have to have something specific like that to get into any particular field. Some do, obviously, but a lot of them, public relations or human resources or nonprofits, things like that, they just require a degree in something. It doesn't have to be in anything in particular. So you can always look at something like that. So I always tell students that education is never a waste. But if you can make the decision, my goal for students is always to walk in with as much information as possible so that you don't have to change your mind. Sometimes you don't know until you get there, but generally that's for people who haven't done as much research as they could have in order to get everything, get as much knowledge in their pocket before they walk into a program or a whatever job it is, whatever it might be. So
yeah.